You're a German entrepreneur and lawyer who has become a leading advocate for the alternative governance models. And with a rich background in corporate law and entrepreneurship, he has pioneered the concept of free private cities.
So the free private city is an apolitical state service provider. And citizens are accordingly treated as customers. The city is organized as a for-profit company, and we call it the city operator. And the operator guarantees its citizens the protection of life, liberty, and property. And it's, of course, much better if you have a free city around your corner than to have to move to another continent to be freer. That means it will be ever more regulation, ever more taxes, ever more money spent. Why? Because it's easier to introduce a law and regulation than to take it away, especially if there's a certain interest group profiting from a certain regulation. And that also is why the current governments are okay with the money system as it is. For them, it's much easier than, say, a gold standard.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Resilient Compass. I'm your host, Jason Cozens. And today, unusually, we do not have my co-host, the bullion baron, Andy Schechtman. He's unable to make it today. But today, we're thrilled to have a very special guest with us, Dr. Titus Gebel. Hi, Titus. How are you?
Hi, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I saw you at the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference. But let me just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself. You're a German entrepreneur and lawyer who has become a leading advocate for the alternative governance models. What does that mean? He'll explain it to you during this podcast. And with a rich background in corporate law and entrepreneurship, he has pioneered the concept of free private cities, which is a revolutionary approach to governance based on voluntary participation and contract-based relationships. And as the founder of Titus, Titus is working to turn this visionary idea into reality. So Titus, welcome to the show. And maybe we could just start off by, could you just give us a bit more color on that your personal journey and the influences that have brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, with pleasure. I was a rather conventional person, educated, studied law in Germany, became a lawyer, but after 5 years, I found out that it's not what I want to do until the rest of my life, right? But I did a PhD in international law, which now is helping me, which was not planned. But I stopped being a lawyer after 5 years and wanted to rather do something creative. And I went into the industry, which at that time was biotech industry in the region where I lived, Heidelberg, Mannheim, that was very strong and hot. And from there, I switched to venture capital. And from there, I discovered that resources is the next big thing. That was back in 2003, 2004. And eventually, I founded my own company, Deutsche Rohstoff, which is a resources holding with mining projects back then in Australia, gold, a small gold mine, silver mine, later tungsten. And we had in the US and in Germany, we had some oil operations. And especially the US oil and gas developed very successful. We went public in 2010 at Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And at the end of 2014, I could retire after being 8 years of a CEO of this company. And out of frustration with politics, I wanted to develop a new concept. I moved then with my family to Monaco, which we found out after several, I would say, screening that this is probably the best place to live for us. And from there, I developed the concept which you mentioned. It's a free private city. And again, the reason for that was the frustration about the political system and also the acknowledgement that we cannot reform it from the inside. It's just too entrenched. It's beyond all repair. And so the idea was to come from the outside and create a completely new product. Happy to talk a bit more about my ideas, why this is a good model, and then we can talk about the model itself, of course.
Yeah, sure. I think we're both singing from the same hymn sheet about effectively giving up on the fact that governments will make any real lasting change about anything. Here with my company, Glint, of course, and it's always been about giving up a bottom-up return to sound money. And you're taking it at a totally different scale, a bottom-up return to how we live. So, Titus, for those listeners who might be unfamiliar what free private cities or private cities are, could you please just describe the core principles and what advantages they offer over traditional ways of governance and running cities and countries, so to speak?
Yeah. Actually, it's just transferring the idea that we know from the market that you have the right to choose your own product and how much you want to pay for it. And if you like it, you buy it. If you don't like it, you just stay away. So it's about creating parallel systems, parallel products, as you are doing with Clint, a parallel payment system, which is basically standalone, even if the traditional payment system is not working as it should.
Are you enjoying the show? A quick reminder then to hit the subscribe button so you can be kept up to date about future episodes. Now, back to the show.
So the Free Private City is an apolitical state service provider, and citizens are accordingly treated as customers. The city is organized as a for-profit company, and we call it the city operator. And the operator guarantees its citizens the protection of life, liberty, and property. Now, the profit requirement is important because it prevents resource wastage and ensures that the city does not become hopelessly indebted. And the element of private in free private cities primarily means that the parties involved are legally on an equal basis. There is no hierarchical relationship like government subject, but it's rather customer service provider. And the city operator can also be organized as a cooperative or owned by the citizen. That is not important. The important thing is that the traditional relationship between rulers and the ruled is replaced by a relationship between customer and service provider. And for the first time in history, there would be a genuine social contract, a written service contract, what we call resident contract, with established rules, not a fictional social contract. That is, by the way, permanently changed by one side. Never us. It's always the other side, the government. And the services provided by the operator include internal and external security, a predefined legal and regulatory framework, and an independent dispute resolution system. Participation is entirely voluntary. Interested individuals and companies enter into a citizen contract or residence contract with the city operator and pay a fixed annual fee for these services instead of taxes. Now, within this framework, a spontaneous order can develop from the voluntary activities and decisions of the citizens. The operator, and that is, I think, one of the most important points, the operator cannot unilaterally change the citizen contract later without the consent of the affected citizen. Dispute between citizens and the operator are adjudicated before external arbitration courts that do not belong to the operator's organization. Now, if the operator ignores such arbitration rulings or abuses their power, the customers will leave and they risk insolvency. Now, you may ask, yeah, it's a nice idea, but how is it possible in the real world? No, justified question, and the first question, therefore I'm going to answer it. Since all land areas are currently controlled by government, establishing a free private city requires the operator to enter into a contractual agreement with an existing state. In this agreement, the host state grants the operator the right to establish the free private city in a specific area under certain conditions that include legal autonomy in various areas. States may be willing to cede some of their power if they promise to gain benefits in return. That may be job creation, foreign investments, or share in profits generated by the operator. The existence of a large number of special economic zones worldwide demonstrates the fundamental willingness of states to pursue this path, and we are already in negotiations with some governments. That's in a nutshell what this is all about. We can certainly discuss why, what are the philosophical backings of this. On the other hand, you may have practical questions. I think this is just not only a crazy idea, but it has a real chance of success because it's not a utopian thing. It actually is a business idea. And a non-concept, providing services against payment. And the reason why I think we have a chance is because people eventually go where they are treated best, right? And this is not the current systems.
Why don't we start with the problems that it's solving? What do you think that free private cities achieve? Why are people wanting to participate in this kind of movement? We find.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, it took me basically 30 years to figure that out, right? Because I was also most of the time, like probably you and others as well, complaining about politics, saying, okay, wrong people are doing things, they're not competent, and they're basically redistribution and lending money to buy votes and all that. But I found out that this is systemic, right? It has nothing to do with the politicians. The current political systems, they are characterized by flawed incentives. But for both, not only the government, also the governed, because the governments are zero accountable and have zero economic consequences if they make poor decisions. The governed, on the other side, are misled into believing they can vote themselves free benefits in the pocket, money in the pocket, right? And what is the result of that? That means the state monopoly on violence is constantly used to make changes in the social contract. So that what we have is a perpetual struggle to influence these changes in a specific direction. And I have been part of this as an entrepreneur in the resources industry. If there was a planned change of the German mining law, I got paper with 1,000 pages or so and say we can comment, so that they later can claim that they have included the industry. But I can tell you, a CEO has not the time to go through 1,000 proposed pages of changes in a law. And that means that certain professional interest groups normally get to a large percentage what they're working for, and the normal citizen or also the normal entrepreneur or market participant is not included. But the problem is that the problem with politics in general is that people are different. What is right for one may be wrong for another. And individual values are ultimately subjective. So that means that any political solution leaves behind those who are forced against their will. And making politics means taking sides and using the desires of some, normally the organized interest groups backed by the media. That is the standard for all. And at the end of the day, enforced by violence, right? Because all political solutions are ultimately supported by the threat of violence from the executive. Now, that's what I say is an invisible civil war, the inconspicuousness of which stems from the fact that the victims of state intervention, us, have no realistic chance of resistance. And then if you have found out that, then it's fruitless to complain about politicians. At the end of the day, they are fulfilling the wishes of voters, which is free lunch, or just follow the current fashions of whatever press is making up. Then people say, yeah, that's what I want. So the only remedy is not to vote other politicians. It's to decentralize and limit power as far as possible, right? The fewer areas of life that politics controls, the less important it is who controls the politicians. And if you want to prevent the state from granting special advantages at the expense of others, that is what's happening, then you must create a government system that cannot grant any special advantages at all. And that is exactly the idea of a free private city. It's a peaceful and voluntary alternative to the political status quo. Because at the end, even if you say a party that has the same idea, say a classic liberal party, right? Let's limit the state to the provision of life, liberty, protection of life, liberty, and property, and some and dispute resolution system. Then over time, naturally, other people say, yeah, no, you should do this, and the state should solve this issue and that issue, and we need more money for this good cause. And so the state will grow inevitably. Because the classical liberal candidate, what can he say to the people in an election? Vote for me, I do nothing for you. Just, you can keep your freedom. That's no chance. Right? There's absolutely no chance. And this, I would say, discovery brought me to, okay, there's no chance that I could found a party or go. I was member of the classical liberal German party for many years. I was even friend of federal ministers and all that. No chance to get this problem solved within the existing system. And only later I discovered this book, The Sovereign Individual, which is still highly recommended, where the authors back in 1997 said, okay, this is not working. The representative democracy will be replaced by democracy of choice. And that's exactly what I'm proposing. You say, you need something that everybody wants, which is protection and safety and peace. Even a criminal does not want to get robbed or killed when he's leaving the house. So you have 100% alignment of interest. And therefore, we can offer this as a mandatory package. But the moment you go above this, we are all different, have different ideas, different preferences.
Yeah.
So this is why we say the only chance to avoid that this is fading away is everybody has a contract where it says, okay, protection of life, liberty, and property, you pay, say, $2,000 per year. And the others cannot infiltrate in that contract. There is no forum that can change the rules, and the operator also cannot change it. And nobody can. That is your personal protection, much better than a constitution. It's a bilateral contract. You know you cannot interfere in your fellow neighbors' contracts.
There's a lot to unpack there. It's phenomenal, as you say. 30 years of your journey, which I'm on my own path about trying to understand what things are and what's going on. I think that you touched on so many different things. Where do we even start? When it comes to those interested parties, we see with the existing system, when it comes to elections, that of course, those people who amplify their message the most tend to get more votes. And when you've got a situation where hundreds of millions can be spent on amplifying one candidate's message over another, then you get those interested parties, of course, investing in these candidates. And there's always some kind of quid quo pro, isn't there? They're always looking for something, some kind of influence back to them. You've got a situation, from my perspective, when it comes to money, a monetary system where you've got the Cantillon effect working beautifully. You've got those closest to money supply benefiting disproportionately from everybody else. Everyone else is wondering why on earth things are getting more expensive, assets are getting more expensive, and no matter how hard they work, they feel they're swimming against the tide. You've got a situation, as you said, that when it does come to elections, what's their message? And it's basically the message that they think the most people will like. It's a bit like daddy getting up in front of two daddies getting up in front of the family and saying, hey kids, you should vote for me as a daddy. I'll make sure what? I'll make sure you do your homework. I'll make sure you go to bed on time. Or someone else saying, I'll make sure you can have as many sweets as you want, stay up as late as you want, doesn't really matter. The distortions in the economy, the distortions in choice, everything are ridiculous. I've experienced this my own entrepreneurship, where you've got government trying to tell you how you should run your business. And I think that there's a lot of people who seem to, I'm sure they are doing their job with the best of intentions. But at the end of the day, they pass regulations which, by their nature, they're generic and don't end up fitting anybody's business. So we're having to, for instance, deal with cascading development processes, which we're supposed to be able to show governance around, which we don't even use internally. We use more of an agile approach. The list goes on and on. But you've made it clear. You've made it quite clear about what you think the solution is there.
Yeah, but coming back to what you said, the problem I see is not a particular regulation or that people are trying to good intended and make their job. The problem, this is over time. That means it will be ever more regulation, ever more taxes, ever more money spent. Why? Because it's easier to introduce a law and regulation than to take it away, especially if there's a certain interest group profiting from a certain regulation. So you have, at the one side, and that also is why the current governments are okay with the money system as it is. For them, it's much easier than, say, a gold standard model, right? Or Bitcoin standard model, because they can press the printing press or start the button, push the button on the printing press, which in today's world is basically done by buying. The central bank is buying bonds from its own state. This is printing money, nothing else. Yeah. So the point is, you will get into a circle which is necessarily leading to more expenses, because you making an expense to buy some voters or some interest groups or just reacting to pressure. Then it's hard to take this back. So what we do next election cycle, other groups will get some goodies, right? And we can see this, we can prove this. The state expense in the last 100 years is going up in all countries, right? And this is one problem. The other problem is regulation. Which is not linked to just distributing goodies or money. It's just if the press or some celebrities say, okay, nuclear energy is evil, right? Then you forbid nuclear energy as a politician, because obviously that's what the people want. And then they come with something else. And that leads also to ever more regulation. And ever more regulation means you cannot decide on that subject any longer. You can't even decide today which pronouns you use to address somebody. So you will also get ever more regulation. And in software, this is, in my view, it's inevitable. That's why these systems are ancient regimes. They're not going to survive unless they radically change. And my concern is that even if somebody like Milei in Argentina is successful, wait 10 or 15 years, and then if people are well enough again, they say, okay, now we are better off, we can start redistributing. And the good guys are voted into power again. So insofar, I would say we have really to at least try an alternative product. Like you're trying with Clint, we are trying with free private cities, which are called international cities as a commercial product by Tipolis, but it's the free private city concept.
Can we take this back to the human feelings and motivations and emotions and decisions around this? It seems that we have a growing dependency feeling. There's a big part of society are dependent, and there's a feeling that government needs to help them. Government needs to be the one that is the catalyst for success. What do you think about that part of society and how?
I have created something which is called the political cycle, which describes how this is going to happen. And it's exactly what you said. The dependence on government is growing, and the expectancy that government is solving your problem is growing. Because if you imagine a circle, it starts, everybody wants to increase their well-being, which is usually material things, right? The easiest thing to do is to take away from others. Most of us don't do that. We're just not taking things away from others or go into a shop and take things without payment. But somebody can do that, the state, right? So the people are going to the state and say, you take away from others, and say it's justice, it's social justice, right? And more groups in the society discover that this is a way to basically increase your standard of living. And the politicians, now this is my learning curve, the politicians have to react to that. Otherwise, they are voted out of power, right? Any real classical liberal politician, he would probably not survive one term if they would ask him, what about redistribution, social security, and all these things? So then, now here's the problem. More and more groups in society are leaving the productive sector and going into the state subsidy recipient sector, right? Take a hairdresser, for example. He or she has to go up each day at 7 a.m, right? But if she would now live on social subsidies completely, maybe the difference $100 or $200 or pounds a month. That's nothing. So people say, okay, I stay in bed and receive social subsidies, which are ever growing. And if not, then I say that's injustice and it's not solidaric. But the point is that, again, the productivity is going down, more and more people. And some people have said if 50% of the electorate is receiving state subsidies, that might not necessarily be direct transfers, can also be you're working in a company that is 100% dependent on state business, right? State paid orders. Then that's the same. And these people have zero incentive to vote against that system. So what happens is that the state is running out of money because of the lack of productivity. Then they start printing money and all these things. Eventually, because new monetary theory does not work. Why doesn't it work? You cannot print as much money as you want because the people will lose trust in the money. And that can go quickly, right? Then they go to gold or Bitcoin or other currencies instead. And then you can't print any more because nobody's taking it. And then the state is running out of money. And then you have big reforms. Even system changes, revolutions are possible then. But what happens then? The circle begins anew. Right? And that is the problem. And so far, we are now in the later phase of that circle. We are already where there's redistribution struggle, that the state is slowly running out of money. So far, it seems they still have money, but if you look at their debt, level is ever increasing. The amount of money is ever increasing. So this is not going to end well. I think we can agree on that. We don't know when.
Yeah, we can. No. I think one of the problems, I can understand why people move into the dependency phase, because the monetary system, as I said earlier on, this described perfectly by Cantillon, means that they feel that they're swimming against the tide. And so the very way in which politicians offer and promise things to the electorate is funded through money printing. Of course, that creates inflation, which it's like a terrible cycle. It comes back in and makes everything more expensive, and then the people are feeling like they're swimming against the tide. And so they're like, I can't afford to live anymore. Why prices are still going up, even though your inflation figures say that they're coming down? It feels terrible. I can't live. And they have no ability to understand and link this to what the reason being is this virtuous cycle where they started printing money in order to give you what you wanted. But of course, the problem is that disadvantages the least well off, and only the richest in society are benefiting. Now you're in a disadvantaged situation. Now you want the state to do something about it. But this virtuous cycle keeps on going up. And as we see there, the US now, 35 trillion going up, a trillion every 100 days. And inflation, the cost of living very high. People how do they survive? And of course, they don't know the alternatives. They're not thought about it, or they don't understand the alternatives. And so they end up just either asking for more, voting in the person who wants the most. And as you say, at some point, we're either going to end up with a very fascist, a very communist kind of government or revolution or something. And that doesn't work either. And you have to go through all of that cycle before eventually we end up back at the beginning of these cycles. How long do you think these cycles last, by the way? I think 100 years or something?
Yeah, I would say it's different, but I think this 4-generation model is a bit probably a good rule of thumb. I think there are certainly countries where it takes longer because the mentality of the population is different, like the US or Switzerland, but it's there, right? And in other countries, it's quicker. The fourth turning, or what Bismarck said, first generation builds it, next generation administers it, the third generation is studying history of art, and the fourth generation is totally down. They can't do it. And that is maybe a very rough rule of thumb of such cycles. Argentina, now it took them 100 years to go from one of the richest countries on earth to poverty rate beyond 50%, right?
Yeah.
And now people seem to have realized that it's not working. We have only this life, and you and I, we don't want to wait another 100 years, right? That's why also our conference is called Liberty in Our Lifetime, because we know that, we understand that, and the politicians have all interests in the world to create this impression that inflation is a kind of a natural disaster. It's coming over us, and we are now solving it. They're creating the problems that they pretend to solve. But this is working with a lot of people, because at the end of the day, taking over the risks of life from you and protecting you against the risk of life is such was attractive political offer that this is everybody who is going on that will prevail, will win the election. And that is what's leading us towards these systems, because it's not going to work. It's impossible, because you cannot basically just promise everything to everyone and then think there are still people willing to work voluntarily and taking entrepreneurial risks and paying 60% taxes. That's not going to work.
No. Yeah, I think what I've discovered over my recent adulthood is actually how short life is. That's number one. I'm now facing towards the end of it. I'm hoping that longevity techniques and technology are going to allow me to live longer. But what I've been really fascinated by is that there are just huge generations of people that are now running the country who weren't even adults during the 2008 financial crisis, which feels like yesterday for me. And yet they have no idea about that. They have no idea about how the system can fail so quickly, and how it's all joined globally, and the whole thing came just within hours of collapse, and nothing's changed. In certain areas, things are worse. But there's a whole generations of younger people, maybe 35 years old, who are actually in really senior positions. I think we even have prime ministers in some countries are running the countries at that age. And they have no idea. And I've suddenly realized that one of the most important subjects, I think, should have been history for me. And I wish I'd studied it more. But tell us a bit more about Tipolis, because you're the CEO of Tipolis, and how does that bridge the idea of free private cities that we've been talking about into practical terms?
Before I do that, let me just mention there's also a foundation, which is a non-profit, and there you find tons of information, much more than on Tipolis website, and it's the Free Cities Foundation, and the website is free-cities.org. There you can find all kinds of information about all of these things, concepts, and real-life projects. Now, Tipolis is a for-profit wannabe city operator, right? We want really to operate those free private cities, or we call it international cities. And at the moment, we are in negotiations with about 10 governments worldwide, and 3 of those negotiations are quite advanced. It's not in Europe, it's not North America, it's rather in that part of the world where people are used to special economic zones, because international cities, in a way, are a next development, next evolution of special economic zones. It's special economic zones for residents. And there are innovative governments there. There are reasonable people who just think, okay, we need to be more competitive than we are at the moment. And the fact is that there are already several thousand special economic zones existing, and the most advanced of them have even, I would say, a model which you can describe as one country, 2 systems. For example, Dubai International Financial Center, they have an own...
Where, sorry? Where?
Dubai International Financial Center. And within Dubai, they have a small place. It's 1 square kilometer, 1.1 square kilometer only. And in this particular part of Dubai, a common law does apply, and they have an own court system, which is manned by judges from other common law, or which are coming from other common law countries like Singapore or the UK. And this small zone is already accounting for 10% of Dubai's GDP, which is spectacular, right? They have several hundred, if not 1,000 companies registered there. And that is a trailblazer for our models. We can say, look, it's already working. I also was involved in the most, I would say, at the Special Economic Zone in Prospera in Honduras, at CEDE Prospera in Honduras. I was chief legal officer while we established it and get it approved by the former Honduran government. And this is something where there's also a good video called Zones of Progress, 20 minutes about special economic zones, where I think that this is far going beyond this philosophical idea. It's already there. We are in a way piggybacking on that development. And you could see 3 trends in the last decades. One is that these special economic zones are going from simple duty-free warehouses to free ports to manufacturing, and from there to services and even financial services. But the most advanced of them are even going further, like, again, Dubai International Financial Center, DIFC. They said, hey, wait a minute, if on the weekends, nothing is happening here, and all the precious real estate is standing empty. And they said we should include a residential component, right? And they have attracted restaurants and art galleries and everything, you name it. And people are and residents. And now these people, expats, have said, yeah, but we also do not want to be subject to Sharia family law. So they also made a common law system for the people. And insofar, they have created a new mini Hong Kong within Dubai. It's not many people know it because there's no specific border, but the other part of rules applies, and it's very successful. And this is going to happen in other places as well, sooner or later, because a lot of countries, they are in urgent need of talented people, and they are willing to treat them as customers and offer them something. Whereas especially the Western countries, they think they can treat us as subjects and do whatever they want and raise the tax without stopping and printing money and coming up with all kinds of regulations. But this is not working because people can choose already between nearly 200 countries. If we now add special zones with residents, we will maybe have in some years another 100 options where you can go to. And this is competition that is forcing the existing states to deliver a better product, to keep their citizens. So I think this is you have one trend that these special economic zones are getting more autonomous and more towards residential. Then you have a second trend that these zones are privately governed and not run by a state authority, because they just have seen that it's often not working. There's a body that has to get a job and he gets it, right? But that is not working. You need a for-profit entity that has a real incentives to make it a success. And so far, you can see that this trend is going into our direction. And there's no matter if a majority in a country or a journalist likes it or not.
And if one of the first thing I think a lot of viewers might be thinking right now is that we're talking about being able to move around the globe is really a privilege mainly held by the wealthiest in society. You can buy passports and things like that. Is one of the criticisms of people not understanding this properly might be, well, the first thoughts about this, is this just another enclave like Monaco where it's a solution for the very wealthiest in society?
No, the very wealthy, the ultra high net worth individuals or rich, say millionaires, they have already several options. They don't need the free private city models. There are about 20 states that have zero taxation or zero direct taxation. I think you have 20 more that have territorial taxation. That means everything you're gaining outside the country is not taxed. So the rich or the super rich already have a lot of possibilities to optimize their taxation to zero. Now, what we are offering is something for the average Joe, or as we have showed in the other Honduran Sede Morazan, which was organized by my friend Massimo Mazzone. They are targeting blue-collar workers exclusively, right? And what they offer is so much better than the rest of this part of Honduras to them that are coming in droves. And what can they get there? They pay $150 a month for a 60 square meter house with air conditioning and washing machines, and their security guards are included in that price. And and outside of the zone, there are gangs. People are afraid to go out when it's dark, and they're living in shitty apartments, and water, electricity problems, all that is solved within the zone. So it's a low-hanging fruit to create a better environment. On the other hand, what is the price for such a thing? We have calculated then for the basic services, which are the protection of life, liberty, and property, some infrastructure, and an independent dispute resolution system, you have to pay about $2,000 a year, right? So that means, of course, you have to spend additional for your healthcare, for education of your kids, but still you would probably have much more in your wallet than in any other traditional Western first world system. And today, mobility is much easier than it was 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. So a lot of people can work from home office. Flight tickets are cheap, and it's not necessary to be at a certain point for all the year. You can even move around between places. So I'm relatively sure that this increased mobility, together with our offer to make an attractive service offer, that is enough to attract people. And there will probably be different target groups for different free cities. Some will target more wealthy people, other will target more longevity people, and other will target workers or everyone. And what I've seen in Honduras is in the first wave are die-hard libertarians and digital nomads to people. But then you have middle-class people from the region that just think that can get better jobs there. Or if it's a working class zone, then regional people. But after that, they're looking for jobs. But after that, it's everyone else, right? And
because I mean, if someone needs to sweep the street, someone needs to be the car park attendant, somebody needs to be able to serve you food. I've seen it's the gentrification often of some of these cooler areas in cities or even islands like in Ibiza, where they become very popular because they're a hotbed of creativity and independent thought. And then, of course, you end up with the rich moving in, and they end up buying everything, and the prices going up and up, and then of course no one can afford to live there. So I suppose at some point people have to come into these communities. They're going to come in with assets, they're going to come in with funds. How do you think you balance this ability? Imagine beautiful private cities constructed. Wow, that looks amazing. We love the tax, we love everything, we love the living. There's some really cool people living there. How do you deal with the fact there's a finite amount of space, maybe, that it isn't just become a Monaco because all the rich move in, and then suddenly the rich are really upset because, who's going to cook the food, that amazing food for us? Used to be an amazing chef. He's no longer living here. And that wonderful woman used to serve us, but that's because they can't afford to live there anymore. Have you thought that type of cycle through?
One of the reasons why Monaco has an issue with that is that it's so small. It's only 2 square kilometers and cannot expand. It's expanding on the sea at the moment. When I'm looking out of my window, I see the sea extension that's supposed to be finished by early 2025. And it wasn't the first one. But this is super expensive, right? Claiming land from the sea, and then especially because going steep inside here, the ground. If we have a bigger area than Monaco, I think it's relatively easy to find then areas that are targeting the lower income group of the population. But if you have a very small space and you are successful, then it's not possible. Then this will drive out people that have less money. So we are looking for at least 10 square kilometers where it's possible, and then it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, sure. I actually studied architecture when I was younger and practiced for a couple of years. I was always in awe of the Zaha Hadid practice, and I was fortunate enough to meet Patrick Schumacher recently, who runs that practice. And I know he's a libertarian of sorts, and he's connected a little bit to, I think, what you're doing, or is he in some way?
Actually, he's a big supporter of the free private city idea and ever was. He is one of our advisors at the Tipolis level. He has also good contacts to heads of governments and is helping us with some introductions. And certainly there are different target groups and a different architecture is needed for each of those. But in principle, our idea is that we say, okay, we're making certain regulations when it comes to architecture in the center of the city because we want to be attractive. But the more outside you come, the more liberty you have to do whatever you want, so that people can experiment with new forms of buildings or whatever. But then if you are in such a zone, you also must be aware that everything can happen with your neighbor's property, right? They can come up with crazy ideas. So people can choose rather living in the inner circle where they know, okay, there's a maximum story height and a certain style, so there will be no bad surprises. Or if they say, no, I really want to create something totally crazy and fancy, then I have to go into another area where other fancy people are living with similar ideas, or people just don't care at all and say, well, it's the cheapest.
One of the reasons I left architecture was, apart from getting attracted to virtual reality the first time it was cool back in the 90s, one of the things that really upset me was this kind of undemocratic censorship that was put on architecture. At the time, I felt that I had no way that I'd be able to express what I was interested in, which was, at the time, I was still learning, but interested in things like deconstructivist architecture or organic architecture, or the kind of thing that actually Zaha Hadid are doing actually very successfully at the moment. So I'm a big proponent to having a canvas that people can express themselves in the way they want. And that my feeling is that actually the market itself will eventually, if something's built that nobody likes, it'll get knocked down and someone will build something else. And it's a natural evolution of
I fully agree. I mean, if you compare the favelas in Brazil, and I have seen it myself, if you compare the favelas in Brazil with the ancient Greek or European cities, okay, they have shitty material, but the principles they look not so much different, right? They're very dense. They have roads which are not following a certain pattern that somebody has created, but just what room they are going. And what if they had the possibility to use beautiful and better materials, then they would look nice like the Greek ancient island towns are looking like. And what I fully agree, the problem we had, especially after World War II, this is a small group of people was dictating their architectural ideas on everyone. And what's the result? It's shit. Right, I'm just coming back from Prague from our conference. People from all over the world coming to Prague to see the beautiful old city. They're coming to Vienna for the same reasons. Nobody's visiting Brasilia because it's just people. It's ugly, and people like beauty. And if everybody contributes to the city with, okay, this is my style, I want to do this, or in a certain quarter, people like-minded people say, this is our quarter. We have some rules. We want to look at it like that. Then suddenly, the city is done by everyone in a way, right?
It's that organic. It's the organic. It's the accidents. It's those things that you never thought would be interesting. It's why parts of old London we love so much. Okay, so what do you think the future is looking to? What would you say if you look ahead at the next 10 years? What are you hoping for? What do you expect?
I'm cautiously optimistic that we bring one of those cities into existence in the next years. And I'm also optimistic because it's not just Tipolis. There are other groups working on similar or comparable projects. So I think this is unstoppable because there's a strong need in the population amongst the rich, amongst the middle class, amongst low income to try out new things because they're dissatisfied with what they have now. And there's now a chance, an Overton windows opening saying, okay, the old systems are somewhat not convincing and a lot of people are willing to try out new things. And also some states and governments are allowing those because they think they have a competitive advantage in doing so. And therefore, in 10 or 20 years, we might even see a multitude of those projects. And it's, of course, much better if you have a free city around your corner than to have to move to another continent to be freer. At the same time, the people will go where they're treated best eventually. That's my conviction. It always has been like that. So if we can deliver a product which is just better than what they have now, they will come. And especially the good, talented people will come because they want to be freer to create what they want to create, what they can do best, be it an architect, be it a medical researcher, be it a software developer or a gaming designer. These people really need a place where they can cooperate peacefully without a coercive government that is telling them all the time what to do and what not to do. So I think our model will be naturally more attractive than what we have now in the West, and a lot of talented people will come, which would then put pressure on the states to behave a little bit more like a service provider and a little bit less as a dictator or somebody who authoritarian regime. Where we tell you what to eat and what to say.
And then there were a couple of things actually I forgot to ask you really. One was like, what happens? We all know people that have fallen on hard times from time to time, or through incapacity, maybe physically unable to work or whatever. What can you explain to people how the concept and the model for free private cities it means that people who end up in those kind of situations are able to carry on living?
Yeah. So there are studies in history, and they're all showing that about 5% of any given population is not capable of helping themselves, mostly due to illness, accident, or whatever, including them excluding age, because this normally has been covered by the younger family members. So in our model, in our international cities, you have basically several layers of protection. First is if you arrive in the city, we would encourage you that you become a member of a self-help group that is comparable to the friendly or fraternal societies in the 19th century. Also in England, you had many of those where the small and middle income people were just paying something into a pot. And then if somebody had a calamity, they would get something out of that. It's basically the mutual assistance thing, right?
It's not dissimilar to what I've learned that's going on in Utah. People tie towards their church, and then what happens is if people fall into hard times, then the community comes together and helps them. But they don't just let them become dependent on that help. They really try to get them back on their feet as well.
I can tell you, if workers are doing this by themselves and you claim that you are ill, you get the payment, but they send somebody who's looking at you if you're really ill, right? So they are much stricter than our state social security system is, which is better because it prevents the misuse, and they are managing basically their own money. Then we would encourage people, if you don't like that, take a private insurance. There are all kinds of insurances, and then it depends a little bit on your wallet and what you want to spend. There's, for example, the opportunity to only entertain a high-risk medical insurance, like in Singapore. That means you do not get everything reimbursed, but only the really expensive stuff. On the other hand, the payment is much lower than that you have to make for this insurance. So these are the first things. Then you have some caritative institutions, religious or churches, or we have some people who are philanthropists. They have their own funds. You can apply for those. Then we would also, there is a legal framework which, for example, says that family members are responsible for each other. So this is also legal protection. And last but not least, there might be a minimal protection by the city operator for those who have fallen through all those 4 safety nets that I mentioned. And so nobody is going to die on the streets. But we want to limit this to really very rare cases. And the upside is that people are getting more aware again of keeping care of their health, of keeping some provisions for calamities in place, and not just relying on the state. So whatever happens, the state will be there. That makes you also lazy and makes you also not really acting carefully in your own affairs. And that's a positive side effect of our system, I think. And on the other hand, again, nobody will starve to death or die on the street.
Yeah. And we mentioned money a lot during this. We actually not tackled that specifically. What's the kind of philosophy around currency and exchange of store of value, exchange of value?
Our philosophy is free banking. It's called free banking. And that means we would not force any currency upon you, but we would very probably promote Bitcoin or invite people who are promoting Bitcoin, maybe establishing a lightning node for the city. And there is also a currency that this is the only thing where we have direct contact to the currency issue, is because this annual fee for our services must be paid in certain currency. And very probably it's one of the currencies that is used in that area, maybe the US dollar, the euro, or any other local currency. But we reserve the right. And I was just a week ago discussing those provisions with our chief legal officer of Tripolis, how we can make it, because fiat currency can collapse, right? Quickly, even. So we have a provision that we might switch to a gold system instead, gold or Bitcoin. We can say, instead of the $2,000, we can demand from you the amount in gold on Bitcoin at the day when you first signed the contract, right? So we have a value stability. Other than that, we would have a normal inflation adaptation clause, but not the real inflation, so shadow stats or so. But this is all in the contract, right? So you can say, okay, there will be inflation adaptation of the currency, and if the currency collapses or is really getting hyperinflated, then they may switch to a gold system or to a Bitcoin system. So I think we are on the safe side. And so far, what the annual fee refers to, but the people should be free to choose what they want, right? If I promote liberty, why should I force people into a certain token or a certain currency?
Let the market decide.
Exactly. Let the market decide.
Yeah, it's fascinating what we've been doing at Glint, working with 20 US states now who are looking to use their constitutional right, which, of course, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 says that no state may make its own currency except gold and silver. And of course, these states, which effectively the US is a republic, and they're worried about the huge amounts of debt and a whole polycrisis of issues that are going on in the country. And it's not that they want to do away with the dollar, but they believe that the citizens should have a choice. And of course, this could act as a really useful mirror if a more sound monetary system is available as a choice. It can correct as a very healthy mirror to the unsound system that's already in place. And actually, there's a very good chance that next year some of these states will pass legislation to enact that. And of course, that means that you'll have state authorized gold currencies being available as a choice to their customers, and that the states would protect that, and the ability for the IRS to tax the capital gain against this other currency should fall away. So you can even start to see I'm finding it fascinating that US states could actually be taking some of these concepts on that we're talking about here. But listen, before we wrap up, Titus, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before on the future of government?
Yeah, I think if you're interested in what's happening in that space, I would really urge you to subscribe to the newsletter of the Free Cities Foundation. It's not coming too often, but if new projects are coming, then you will hear it from there. Also, what's happening to the existing projects. And then you can decide, okay, maybe this free city is of interest to me. And we also encourage companies like Clint to come and present their services. Then if we have a free city and say, hey, this is a secure payment system and it's gold backed, so inflation protected. And insofar, I hope to see many of your listeners at one point in time in our hopefully upcoming free cities.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Thank you very much, Titus. We'll put some links down below, but can you just give the links again verbally? We'll put them in the description where people should go and find out more information.
It's free-cities.org. Then you have sub-pages about the conference that is happening once a year. These projects are presenting themselves. And you have a community directory of the existing projects. And you might look into that and see if you like one or the other. And then we have a very interesting podcast. I think, Jason, you have been a guest there already as well. If not, you should do it. We have more than 100 editions now. It's Timothy Allen's podcast and also very interesting stuff. Yeah.
Excellent. Titus, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a truly enlightening conversation. It's been an hour of just nonstop interesting discussion. So thank you very much and good luck. And I wish the whole movement, like a lot of these independent things, success. And I also want to say a big thank you to you, Titus. Without entrepreneurs and future thinking people like you, who literally sacrifice a lot of their life to try and get some of these things going, these things wouldn't be possible without people like you, Titus. So please keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you.